Mini episode 1362 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1362. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here, and I have with us beloved friend and FDH Lounge dignitary Jake Digman, as I always say, the world's greatest MMA ring announcer, also our FDH MMA editor, and this was going to be simply a discussion on SummerSlam per Jake's idea, but we're going to go a little bit bigger and broader. We're going to do this in two parts here and look at the state of the business, because it's a very, very pivotal state in the time in the business. I think the most interesting time in this renewed wrestling war from 2019 forward, and maybe the most pivotal time since, maybe 1998, when WCW and WWF at the time were ships crossing in the night. It's a very pivotal time. We're going to be talking about in this discussion specifically AEW, where they're going. They have 4 ginormous shows coming up in the next 6 weeks at a time when they're really looking to build momentum. They have a couple of big signings apparently happening. They've been developing the only really hot over talent in the American wrestling scene over the last 2 years or so. So a lot to talk about there with them. And as I say, let me reach over and make the hot tag to my good buddy, Jake Digman. Jake, how you doing today, my friend?
Ricky, I am doing absolutely wonderful. It is always a pleasure to be on the FDH Lounge. I think it's just because I thoroughly enjoy the company. I love having the title of Dignitary.
Yes.
It just makes me feel important on any day of the week.
Yes, and Jake Digman, you more than most people deserve to feel important. You're the very epitome of somebody where people should be throwing rose petals at their feet when they walk down the street here. So the fact that I can do so figuratively over these digital airwaves does my heart good, my friend.
In the words of our old friend Kyle Ross, oh, come on!
Well, I'm going to get into something that I had said with discussions with Kyle Ross on the show previously. That'll be we'll be looking back to something that I had said previously with Kyle, because I think it's relevant to this moment in wrestling in August 2021. And as far as it goes with AEW, and you and I were talking about this a bit off air, the week that we're recording this is going to be the first Rampage taking place in Pittsburgh, the new Friday night show. The next Friday night will be an even bigger one, the first dance in Chicago, the United Center, the almost certain debut of CM Punk. And then, just about 2 weeks later, the all-out pay-per-view that is going to be back in Chicago again. By the way, Meltzer reported recently that Chicago was poised to become maybe the second biggest wrestling market for AEW. He said that before any of this stuff happened and the additional Rampage and whatever. I guess this is what they were talking about. But then the one that I'm looking forward to maybe the most on an aesthetic level is September 22nd. And all this is, again, assuming that the next wave of COVID doesn't swamp us all and force these back to the sound stages. But the Arthur Ashe show in New York, 17,000 people in the midst of a pandemic. I'm about to wince as I say packed upon each other, but that's part of the beauty of it as far as the visuals of that place. The visuals of Arthur Ashe, the way they're going to light that place, the way the crowd is going to be hot, the very likely debut of now Bryan Danielson once again, he'll be known in AEW presumably. Again, this is an unprecedented gauntlet. I was going back, I was racking my head. In the Monday Night Wars days, you didn't really have specific editions of the shows being, especially weeks out, being promoted. Maybe it would be a stray Georgia Dome Nitro here and there. But this gauntlet that AEW is going on at a pivotal moment in their growth, and as they have been just growing all of these hot young stars, it's an electric moment for this growing company, my friend. Possibly a defining one, and this might surprise a lot of people, but I'm going to say this. potentially the launching pad for them to surpass Raw's ratings at some point in the next 12 months?
Well, you say that, Ricky, like surpassing Raw's rating at this point is going to be very hard. I'm just going to be blunt about this. Raw is impossible watching. If you listen to this and you watch 3 hours of it, I watched an hour and a half of Monday Night Raw last night, and I wanted to like just drive a screwdriver into my brain.
It's awful.
And it's so awful. And I was hoping, like there's one thing on Monday Night Raw that's worth watching, in my opinion, and that's your almighty WWE champion. And we'll get into that. We'll get into that conversation later on. We talk WWE. But when you look at like the wrestling business as a whole right now, and the idea of the two big, when you think of like as far as like recognizable names to your casual fan that have watched in the past 15 years, the two biggest names out there that you can get, in my opinion, that can actually still go, and I'm not talking about, like some cast off from the Attitude Era that, the WWE seems to continuously rely on, are CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. And you can call Bryan Danielson whatever you want, Bryan Danielson. And the point of this, when he comes out there, that crowd's going to start chanting yes. Yep. And that's all that matters. And as much as I'm sure Vince McMahon and company want to copyright the word yes, they cannot.
That's true.
There's nothing they can do to prevent that from happening. And it is, as you said just a second ago, this, in my opinion, is one of the most exciting times in a very, very long time. Dare I say, since 2001, when WCW closed, and I mean, even before that, it was like, for a while there, it's really like, 99,
right.
98, that, there is legitimate competition. I go to there, TNA, LOL. But
all right.
It is, God bless them, that little engine that could. Hey, I worked for them one show, and, they treated me great, so I have not a bad word to say about them.
There you go.
Anthem and everyone up at Impact Wrestling. But this is the most legitimate competition that has come towards the WWE's way in a very, very long time. And I just said to you off there before we started recording, in my opinion, AEW is the best pro wrestling show to watch on TV if you're a pro wrestling fan, because one of the best things about being a pro wrestling fan, and one of the things that, for me personally, that gets me excited, is the possibility of many things that happen. And that harkens back to the glory days of the Monday Night War, where all of a sudden you'd be sitting there and watching, and here comes this guy, he's jumping from, coincidentally, from USA to TNT.
Yes.
And 20 years later, we're jumping from USA to TNT. It's funny, what's old is new again. And AEW has done such a fantastic job of incorporating the elements of the past with, with guys like Jake the Snake Roberts, guys like they just recently brought in Chavo Guerrero. You've got Arn and Tully, and you never know, another just recently got beat. So a showdown on AEW TV where they do a Horseman reunion, and then all of a sudden Tully turns on them and the Pinnacle beats them down. I'm on board for something like that.
Yeah.
There's so many endless possibilities that just as wrestling fans get us excited. Whereas Monday, it's like, I guess I'm watching this because it's Monday. This is what I do.
Well, exactly. And I'm going to go to 2 different instances of the last wrestling wars. The one is particularly the mid to later 80s, as the NWA was starting to become defined pretty much around Jim Crockett Promotions. And you had them, and you had the WWF at the time, and then at the time of the Monday Night Wars. What didn't make sense back in that day, in the mid to late 80s, would be for Crockett to feature anybody from any other promotions. Harley Race, I think, maybe once or twice in early 86 might have been on World Championship Wrestling, but that was like the extent of it. You didn't have the other territories featured, because what was the good in doing that at the time? It was based at that time more around the money you would make at the houses than whatever the TV ratings were. And why would you bother just showcasing some other territory's talents? You go to the late 90s, and WWF at the time, the one thing they were doing, in addition to featuring guys who would jump from WCW, you remember the short-lived ECW quote-unquote invasion of early 97. Once in a while they would do things like that, because there was the sense that if you could present that anything can happen thing with somebody showing up from anywhere, that would be something, and this was really the beginnings of internet buzz in the mid to late 90s, that there was value in that. You look at it now with Tony Khan and the whole thing of the Forbidden Door, and it's almost like in the modern era, if Pro Wrestling USA had worked, because you could have guys, and you have this all the time, guys and gals showing up from Impact, from NWA, from, I don't think we've had Ring of Honor yet, but give it time. So in addition to everything else that AEW has with their own people, we've had New Japan guys coming over at a time when New Japan is significantly bigger now than when they were featured on WCW programming in the 90s. By the way, fun fact, I looked this up. Scott Norton, when he was on the NWO B team in like 98, was the IWGP champion at the time. Try to imagine that. Try to imagine New Japan today sending over their top guy to be a mid-card guy on the lead programming.
Rick, the Great Muta was in the Dark Carnival with the Demon and freaking Vampiro.
Yes. It's a different day and age. It's a different... Yes. I mean, New Japan to wrestling fans today is the prize that it should have been regarded as by wrestling fans in the 90s. Everybody today is more educated on the different types of wrestling out there. You've had AAA guys coming over, as I continue my list here, and probably other promotions yet. Nick Gage from GCW. So that's part of it right there, Jake, is that what we didn't have in the 80s when Pro Wrestling USA fell apart as an alternative to Vince, what we didn't have in the 90s outside of the short-lived ECW WWF alliance to go up against Nitro in the ratings, is you have the additional element today with the Forbidden Door, quote-unquote, being punctured of where anybody who's outside of the WWE can show up on Dynamite or Rampage, and probably will.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as, once again, going back to, as wrestling fans, that's what makes us so exciting. That's what makes you want to tune in and watch. Like, WWE doesn't offer that. I don't know if it's because of their corporate structure or what it is, but, like, you know, everything there is so overly polished.
Yes.
That, like, if something's happening, you're going to know something that's happening. Like, I, as a fan, went absolutely crazy. Like, you know, like, it wasn't lost on me when Kenny Omega went over to Impact Wrestling and won their championship.
Right.
And was a champion down in AAA. It was like, I was just thinking, you know, 20 years ago, if this happening would have been absurd.
Right.
Like, everybody would have lost their collective minds. And now you see it's just kind of like, you know, the possibility and the idea of, what was it, this past Wednesday on Dynamite, we just saw Tanahashi show up.
Right.
And so that means if Tanahashi can show up, Okada can show up, anybody from New Japan, Jay White's now working with Impact. It really is an exciting time that, you know, as long as you're not just in it. I have friends that are, you know, strictly WWE. That's the only wrestling that I watched, and blah, 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 blah. It's the only thing they know. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. That's you, you know?
Right.
But this is, to me, and it's like, it has far less, it has far less polish to it, I guess.
Yes.
And it may sound like a bad thing, but to borrow words that Edge used when he made his comeback, there's a lot of grit with AEW. And it feels like this conglomerate, it feels like what would have happened if, like, WCW and ECW really did form an alliance and have their own show on TNT. To me, it feels like the spiritual successor of those two companies, getting moments like, you know, Arn and Tully reuniting, while at the same time seeing, you know, Jericho and Hoovy. And by the way, I just got to bring this up real quick on a sidebar.
Yeah.
I found it absolutely hilarious that they were, like, touting, like, Jericho almost ripping off Hoovy's mask last week. Because I'm like, didn't he do that, like, 20 years ago and reveal that he was a 14-year-old girl?
Right.
There's a whole storyline around that. But at the same time, it shows the respect they have for the history of the business and Lucha, and being like, okay, you know, the relevance, even if he has been unmasked, it's a symbolic gesture. And then they've done things like, if anybody would have told you 3 weeks ago that Nick effing Gage was going to be on national television, you'd have been like, you're lying.
No, I agree with that.
Who is that crazy? You know, or we're going to see Chris Jericho in a death match, or even going beyond that, we're going to see the former Zack Ryder, a.k.a. Always Ready Matt Cardona, winning the Game Changer Wrestling World title. The symbolism, I guess, that is surpassed CZW and all that. That is like the new, like, hardcore deathmatch wrestling.
I guess. Honestly, I wasn't really familiar with them until recently. I just wasn't familiar. They weren't on my radar, actually, until that happened.
Which shows someone like Cardona coming in there is working, because all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're noticing it. And as far as, like, what I thought was what is the most heel thing you could do, winning, like, the ultra-violent hardcore championships world title?
Yeah.
Go to Disneyland with the belt.
Right.
I'm like, that is absolutely perfect. You know, stuff like that. And just as a fan, I see stuff like this, and I'm like, heck yeah. I had no interest in. I've met the guys. I did some quasi business with them in the past, I guess you could say. But like, as far as seeking it out, I had no interest. And when I heard about what happened with Cardona at the GCW show and him winning the title, everybody throwing bottles at him, I'm like, man, that's like heel heat you haven't seen since the 80s.
Yes. Well,
it's like, all right.
You know, also him referring to them as the GCW universe. I mean, that's a nice little bit of healing as well. And
love it.
It's perfect. And I saw a thing tonight, by the way, just talking about unusual elements being part of their promotion. As I was checking out a little bit of the We're Live, Pal show this evening, they played a clip on there. Guest ring announcer Denise Salcedo channeling Melissa Santos doing the ring introduction. So that was kind of amusing as well. Yes. Something you never thought you'd see. But which is, you know, again, that's the theme of, I guess, what we're talking about here with AEW is stuff you never thought you'd see. For me, a guy like Tully Blanchard, Mark, from way back, he's been a guest on the show. To see him featured again is friggin' amazing. Arn Anderson has always been like an icon to me, so seeing him out there is tremendous as well. So they feature the legends. They managed to give the rub to the young guys. And again, when I said this before about possibly passing Raw in the ratings, and I looked, and again, and there's a pretty decent gap there because AEW is still basically at this point, their new baseline seems to be somewhere just above 1 million. And I think the Raw baseline is somewhere below 2 million. So it's still, they're not at a convergence point yet, but my prediction is they're going to be, because you look at the hottest stars in the business right now, and it's so funny that WWE is the company that has the brand split, because they're the ones that can least afford it. Who would be in the top 10 right now? Roman Reigns, but an underrated part of that is this has been going on a year now. Everybody that puts over that storyline, he's been the champ over a year, and they apparently want to milk this till WrestleMania. So Roman Reigns, John Cena has been a game changer since he came back, but he's a part-timer. Goldberg notably hasn't been. Maybe you say Lashley or Drew, maybe. But the guys who are and gals who are undeniably big stars in AEW, and by the way, Becky Lynch, obviously, the minute she comes back, and Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, they're as bad as a lot of the stuff in the women's division is. They have probably the biggest stars per capita as opposed to the men. In AEW, the only real star on that level, I would say, is Britt Baker, but she is really, really, really coming on strong. And then from there, wherever you want to go, whatever direction, Darby Allin, MJF, Moxley coming over, Jericho still brings a lot of star power to the table. Even the younger guys, Jungle Boy is really over at this point. And Orange Cassidy, no further words needed on that whole phenomenon. And just on we go here. Hangman Adam Page. So,
I was about to say Hangman Adam Page.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And more on him in a second. I want to circle back.
And a guy you forgot as far as legends go.
Yeah. Sting. Well, I mean, he's the definition of a part-timer as far as wrestling goes. But yes, no, he's there on a regular basis. He's giving the rub, and he is performing well in that role. And, you know, just big stars, emerging stars. Sammy Guevara definitely has gotten a lot bigger in the last year or so. And so Eddie Kingston, your guy, you know, look at since he came over, how big of a sensation he's been. So, you know, and the ones who are bigger than they were before but have room to get bigger still. Penta El Cierro Medro, I would say, potentially. Ray Phoenix as well. So, you know.
What'd you call Penta what?
Penta El Cierro Medro. Isn't that his name now? It's not Pentagon Jr. anymore.
No, it's not. Yeah, you might be right on that one. No, I can't even see what it says.
He'll always be.
On his figure here, it's Penta. No, it's El Penta El Cerro Miedo.
Oh, okay. My bad. I mangled it. Okay.
No, he has a different name in every single promotion.
Well, that's true. That's true.
No,
Right.
Pentagon Jr. on it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well,
Like, God bless that guy.
sure,
Anyway,
exactly.
sorry to interrupt you.
No, I mean, I'm almost to the end of my point, but it's a thing where WWE, they're locked in right now on the big money because of their TV contracts and everything like that, and they have a tendency to sell out things like if they want to go to, do a stadium show in Las Vegas for SummerSlam, to put tens of thousands of people in the seats, and they do that for WrestleMania, basically off of the legacy, and it's basically inertia that's propping it up. But how long can that continue? It's a thing here where when the perception is, and in the internet age, perception is a lot more fluid. It's not like it was back in the day where WCW had to work so hard. Without the NWO, they never would have passed the WWF because WWF was the default name for wrestling at that time, and nobody could convince anybody any different till the NWO got out there. There was no Twitter back then. There was nothing that more easily put the hotter brand in front of people like there is now. Everything's more fluid. I say the WWF cannot maintain their status as they're still going to be the dominant brand financially. SmackDown will probably do better ratings still because they're on network TV. But when you're talking about fans, per capita in the arenas, as far as, an apples to apples basis there, TV ratings of Raw versus Dynamite, which is the fairest comparison at this point, AEW, at this rate, they're going to pass them, I think, in a year on these metrics, and I think they may already be passing them on the attendance metrics.
I would agree with you. I think that I actually agree 100% with you. I think that if you look at right now, WWE is in a situation where they are new again because there hasn't been any live events because of COVID, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. But I think we both can agree that during the COVID times of the Thunderdome versus the AEW at Daly's Place, or even when they couple shows they did up at QT Marshall's gym, their usage of their wrestlers as fans made it much more watchable television.
Yes.
WWE was to the point where it was just like, if I want to watch bad improv, I'll just go watch bad improv.
Right.
Because this is making bad improv look good. And them coming back, they did a thing last night on Raw that I caught, which was a match with Alexa Bliss and Piper Niven. Dewdrop, that's her name.
Right.
And in the match, all of a sudden, this is on for a live crowd. She looks at Lily the doll. Lily the doll on a close-up shot winks at her, and then they zoom in on a close-up of Dewdrop's reaction, and then of course she lost to the most devastating move in all of WWE, the surprise roll-up, which by the way, on 2K20, if that doesn't have the most difficult kick-out meter, they've completely screwed up. I hate it. It's just things it's such a crutch that as a longtime fan, you see it and you're just like, okay, this is, it's the same thing. Oh my God, I'm distracted. 1, 2, 3. But seeing the situation with Alexa and Dewdrop, looking at it going that was in front of a live audience that they spliced in a CGI camera shot of a doll doing a fake wink.
Yeah.
People they're gonna shit all over it.
Yeah.
I don't really know any other way to describe it.
Oh, they are.
The audience is going and at the same time, you've got a company that has we look at the guys that have gone to AEW that are finally starting to get their just a guy named Miro, for example. You
Yes.
brought him up yet?
Yeah, Miro.
Everybody was behind Rusev. Everybody, the crowd organically got behind Rusev as not only a heel when he was getting built up to get sent to John Cena, but also when he made the Rusev Day babyface run. And it was just the problem that the WWE has, and I'm sure we could ask a friend or two that may or may not agree with this, is that it's catering to the whims of one man that needs to retire. And I have a feeling, based on everything that's happening, that retirement may not be too far off, which is the reason why Vince McMahon doesn't consider AEW quote-unquote competition to him. Because I think if you look at all the signs from a business perspective, Vince is looking to get out of the wrestling game, and he's looking to get as much money as possible for his lifetime efforts. At the same time, also looking to be able to make sure that his family is taken care of, i.e., Stephanie, Triple H, Shane, if he wants to. Shane just got a job somewhere else, I just read online. But looking at they're taken care of in the long term. So it's just it's a very interesting time to be a pro wrestling fan, because it's like, okay, that we have the rise of AEW, and then at the same time you look at it and go, oh crap, if they sell off the WWE, then it's like, all right. I mean, I don't know about you. I've never lived in a world where Vince McMahon doesn't own the WWE.
Exactly.
That would be the most bizarre thing ever.
Exactly, and I have some thoughts on that when we're in our WWE conversation. I want to expand on that and that conversation. As far as it goes with AEW, in looking at this here, again, I think they are poised for some incredible things. One thing I think they're going to have to adjust, and this is where I love having a conversation with you, because this is where, like, me and you can get the dirt underneath our fingernails digging into this stuff here, because a lot of people might not get where I'm about to go, but you will understand this. With the introduction of the 4 quarterly, don't call them Clash of the Champions TV specials on TNT, you're now at the point of having 8 big shows per year as opposed to 4. And the pacing, I think, needs to change on that. We've had, for example, 9-month championship reigns with the world title on average. With Omega, it might go longer. I understand, by the way, side note, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here, because I know Hangman Page's wife is pregnant, about ready to give birth, I think, right around the time of All Out. I understand they want to give him paternity leave, but the way they're doing this, heating him up like they did and then cooling him back off and then push him again for full gear, I don't know about that. And the whole thought being, you want to get the Punk and Danielson title matches in while Omega's still got the title. Yeah, but it's a foregone conclusion if we all know Hangman Page is getting the belt. And foregone conclusions, unless...
AEW has lived off of the idea of not giving you these foregone conclusions.
Well, yes. And
so if you bring in somebody like a CM Punk or a Bryan Danielson, I would detour and not give the title personally to Hangman Adam Page. I'm not saying not to give it to eventually. I just don't think if you get those names there, him beating he could very easily be the face that beats one of. I have an idea that I want to run by you. Okay. The reason why I cut you off, and I apologize.
No problem.
The idea and the concept of, they're leaning towards the idea of Christian possibly being the challenger at All Out. I would much rather, if you're paying a CM Punk, do the money match. Do CM Punk versus Kenny Omega, and then at the end of the day, because you mentioned, the idea that Bryan Danielson is supposed to be coming in the Arthur Ashe show, right?
Yes.
What's the date on that one again?
I think September 22nd.
Listen, I'm just going to throw this out as a booking what if to you, okay?
Okay.
CM Punk wins the championship in Chicago, right?
Okay.
And then immediately turns heel.
Okay.
The next night on Dynamite.
Okay.
And just heals on the crowd.
Okay.
And he's like, look, I'm only here to take this guy's money. So now you have a guy who's an outsider. He goes, I'm not an EVP. Oh no, I'm a president. I'm beyond all this. I don't want to. I think heel CM Punk could do so much more business rather than babyface CM Punk. And I think Punk, more than Danielson, could get that crowd to absolutely hate him. If he just flat out says, I only came here to, get the ring rust off my boots, win this title, which doesn't mean a damn thing to me, so I can go main event WrestleMania one day and get what I truly want.
Okay.
There's so many elements. I mean, I know, I got to hear your voice. It's like, that's kind of out there. He's going to come back and be, he's going to be the conquering hero in Chicago. So you can't do it in Chicago that night. You give him, the build of, oh my God, and then Adam Page being the one that dethrones CM Punk, because we don't know how long I don't see Punk coming in for a multiple-year run. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Punk's run 6 months. We don't know how long it's going to be for, unless, is it out there that has been reported what he's signing for?
No, it's not. Well, a couple things. I mean, that's not a bad idea, but I have a couple of counterpoints to that. One being you're really cutting off the Elite storyline right at the heels there, because what happens to Omega afterwards? He's sidelined in all of this, if that's the case. And there is, by the way, there is money to, if we do it that way, there is money to be made in Hangman having a big title defense against Omega, because Omega can say, you never beat me for the title, blah, blah, blah. There's still money to be made, because you have to do Hangman Omega as a big match at some point. There's no escaping that, regardless of who Hangman beats for the title. The thing is, I would look at this and I would say, I would not be opposed. My thought maybe wouldn't be to turn Punk heel, but maybe to lose it back to Omega, because there's still time before November. And to be, when you talk about not doing the expected thing, sometimes short title reigns or somebody wins but then loses it back relatively quickly, that should be a tool in the toolbox. Not the way the WWE has used it, but, you can use it as a tool in the toolbox.
Like Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, the late 80s.
Yes. I mean, sometimes something that breaks it up is a good way to go. Now, I think, though, in looking at this, the other counterpoint thing that I've got to say to you is when you're talking about CM Punk being out there on Dynamite, talking about using the title as a chance to get to main event WrestleMania. So basically, Jake, in 05 and in 11, we had the Summers of Punk. You're basically wanting to book a winner of Punk.
Maybe I just never got a proper conclusion to that storyline, and I'm just kind of like envious to see it finally play itself out. I'm not sure, but you're right. You're absolutely right on that. But my thing is, though, if you're AEW and you're TNT television or TBS, it's going to be Turner. So we're still Turner.
Yes.
It's going to be on TBS at this point. If you're bringing in a name like a CM Punk and a name like a Bryan Danielson, you don't bring them in to do like they've done with Christian and just make them another guy.
Right.
They need to be, and it's like, and I hate to say this, but this is kind of where my logic was going with.
Mm-hmm.
When you look towards the future on it, it's like Adam Page is going to be there. He's not going anywhere.
Right.
You need to strike while the iron is hot, and you need to make something happen that's going to move the needles, and then use that momentum to build a star. Now, to me, the big thing with Adam Page is, and I know it's, everyone wants to win the championship, on his way to winning the championship, or something he can do on the before that happens, is no one's ever kicked out of the one-winged angel.
Right.
Everyone's always said it's going to be him to do it.
Right.
Him kicking out of the one-winged angel in a number one contenders match or whatever.
Okay.
And, oh my God. And then you can lead to, what do we do with Omega? Omega's going to find himself, even though, he's got the 3 other championships to worry about, too.
Right.
So it's one of those, there's different directions and different webs and things that you can do with it. I just emphasize, and it doesn't have to be like the heel summer of Punk or anything. I just thought of the idea because, if you've got him coming in, all of a sudden he's healing on the crowd, and then he's in Arthur Ashe Stadium and trying to get them to boo him, and all of a sudden a Bryan Danielson debuts, and it's like, I've been there, I've done that. It ain't that great, trust me. I'd rather be here. And then all of a sudden you're putting over where you're at as this is the spot to be. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's true.
It's like, and going back to the start of this, as a wrestling fan, that gets me excited. And just can you just envision, that entire Arthur Ashe Stadium when Bryan Danielson's like, I've already been there.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't get there.
Right.
Some of us did, and you know what? As of right now, I can tell you, because I'm here and you're here, they're here. This is the spot to be. I can see 17,000 people doing the yes, and that visual you see with like an overhead shot, like that ESPN shot of Arthur Ashe Stadium going, yes, yes, yes. I see that more than I dare I say. The Kenny Omega thing is kind of getting stale.
It is.
To me, it's not going anywhere.
It is.
And it's like, we thought it was building to something, and it's like, I have no interest in seeing Christian take the title off of him.
No.
What are you going to do then? Yay. Cool.
Well,
just like I didn't want to see Edge take the title off of Roman. It's like, sure, put on a good match, get the opportunity, but you're a veteran. At this stage in your career, put the young guy over.
Sure.
Which makes no sense, because I'm about to say bring in another outsider and put the belt on him. But there's a difference. CM Punk, he can move. He can move the needles. He's going to get people talking. People are like, oh my God, I have to see this. Christian, no. Had he not come back at the Royal Rumble, we already know he could wrestle.
Right.
Maybe. He's just, unfortunately, I love me some Christian Cage. He's just not on the level of a Danielson, on the level of a Punk, or any of the other guys that they're bringing in. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I'm a big Christian Cage fan, but I agree with that. Having said that, one of the things is about AEW that is so great is what kind of a buffet of wrestling they are, of all different kinds of whatever. And for Christian, the way that he is such a strong master, Christian Cage, a master of the fundamentals and everything like that, and that he can take that kind of a match and make it entertaining in a way that few others can. So that's a strength that he brings. But yeah, he's not going to take the title, just like we knew it was a lame duck situation at the last pay-per-view when it was Orange Cassidy and Pac out there. We knew neither one of those guys was leaving with the title. We know Omega's keeping the title, and that's the whole thing here, too. I'm rarely critical of Tony Khan, but I will be on those things there. Another thing is, too, where this isn't a big missed opportunity from AEW's point of view, and Tony Khan, I guess, made a statement about this when he was asked about it, about the unification match with Rich Swann, why it was not even mentioned on Dynamite. And he was like, no offense, but let Impact sell their own pay-per-view. Well, if your guy is in a championship versus championship match, I realize that the money is going to the other company, but for the love of God, you should at least put that over, because it makes your guy look bigger when he comes back with that belt the next week. So I feel like Tony Khan probably wasn't looking at the big picture on that one, but by and large, he's been so great at everything that he's done. Another recommendation I have going forward here, you may or you may not agree with me on this. There's been talk, and I think based on what we saw last week with Kingston and Darby and Moxley in the six-man trios titles. Totally agree they should do that. I'm going to say also, too, because it's so hard to get so many of the women in the mix. They have a deep women's division, but no real focus point outside of the title. I'm going to say women's tag team titles. Yeah, that's going to be 6 titles, but 4 in one division, 2 in the other. You're now going to have 3 hours of TV time per week, plus the quarterly schedule, the quarterly specials, the pay-per-views. You don't defend every title on every one of the pay-per-views. You can kind of stagger it out on which ones don't get defended there, but that's how I see it going. Do you agree with me that would be the right way to go, is to add both of those titles?
I'm more sold on the Trios Championship than on the Women's Tag Team Championship, and the only reason why is they already have a Trios division set up.
With all the factions, yeah.
The Women's Tag Division, I mean, they did that Women's Tag Team title tournament not too long ago, or whatever it was, and I was on their YouTube thing. I didn't watch it, but I know it happened.
Right.
I forget who won. I think Eva Lise and somebody won that tournament, if I'm not mistaken. Out of the two, I'm not opposed to them, but out of the two, I personally would much rather see the Trios Championship. I think there's a lot of intrigue behind that, and there is already 2 women's tag team titles on WWE properties. I know it's a different thing. However, there's not a Trios Championship on WWE. And as far as the mainstream goes, if I had to prioritize the 2, I would prioritize the Trios Championship over the women's tag team, the women's tag title, only because it's something new and it's something that I think that fan base would really get behind.
Well, and here's the thing.
Would be like,
oh, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that, Jake. And here's the thing, that, some of the roots of AEW come out of the, ironically, recently revived, post-pandemic here in California, or at least we thought we were post-pandemic, PWG. And, that there's a lot of PWG influence here, beyond the Young Bucks, beyond Excalibur. There's a lot of that influence and that part of the indie ethos that is in AEW. So it's sort of a mixture of the best of the indie world with what you were talking about before, the spirit of WCW at its best, the spirit of ECW at its best. And in the indie world, Trios titles, this is basically coming out of the Mexican influence, right? AAA, Trios titles there, hence the name Trios titles instead of 6-man tag team titles. We've never seen it. I mean, if you consider Lucha Underground to be a significant indie, and I do, although where they fit in the landscape when they were around is kind of hard to peg, but they didn't even have tag team titles. They just had the trios titles. So we're used to it.
That was their tag team titles.
It was, essentially. So we've seen it in indies, in big indies and whatever, but we've never seen it in the mainstream, Jake. Yes, WCW had a six-man title, but they treated it as a joke most of the time. It was a mid-card deal. We've never seen in the major leagues ever before a six-man title / trios titles treated as big league. World class is the closest that comes to that with the Von Erichs in the 80s, but that was a territory. That's apples to apples. We're talking about a major promotion, one of the big two. So yes, that would be a novelty, Jake, that would be significant to have a trios title that is on par with the World Tag Team titles.
Yeah, and I mean, especially like you just said with the influence, I mean, you bring out like Death Triangle, there's a team. We've got like, you know, you can put anybody together from the Elite. You know, there's another team. I mean, there's so many.
Best friends.
AEW is so faction heavy that this idea, like, it absolutely, you know, it almost writes itself.
Yeah.
That it, you know, something that is that they could, you know, it to me, it's just absolutely. I'm actually standing here looking at my part of my AEW collection. It's kind of like my figure collection, and just kind of like the inner circle. Bam, you know, put Santana Ortiz and Hager together. There's your, you know, their trios champions.
Right.
There's so many different groups, and there's so many different groups that they could have that are challenging for, like, even like they have job groups. Like I was watching Dark or Elevation or whichever, I don't know, one of their YouTube shows, and they had what's his face? They had Ryan Nemeth and Peter Avalon.
Oh, the Wingman! I love the Wingman.
Else are like a faction. Like, all right.
I love the Wingman. The Wingmen are awesome.
The Wingman, yeah, thank you. Oh, it was great. They dragged Peter Avalon out on a. They dragged him out on a sled.
Yeah.
And then he went in and proceeded to. I think he lost, but you know, it's just like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that is just absolutely. It's again, it goes back to being something different that would set, you know, them apart, but at the same time, something familiar. That, okay, I recognize this. I know this. This is familiar. I know who these people are. So if someone who's casually, and that goes back, you know, this is something that AEW has done a bazillion times better than WWE, and that's not even a word, but so much better than WWE. The way they treat their legends, they treat Arn Anderson like he's a big deal.
Yep.
They treat Tully Blanchard, Jake the Snake Roberts, Sting. WWE, they just come out there, they just treat legends like, here you go, come out here so Randy Orton can beat you up.
Fodder to get the young guys over, and not even young guys, it's Randy Orton. Yes, exactly. And that's what they miss, is that most wrestling fans, it's a multi-generational kind of a thing. We want to see the guys we grew up on treated with respect. We want to see them and feel the warm and fuzzies. We don't want to see them just be exploited for heat. You know, what WWE, they fell into this habit in the mid-2000s when they were getting Randy Orton over as the legend killer. And ever since then, they've basically treated that as the only way to basically use legends. And you are so right about this, because there are just so many things where, again, and it's hard to believe there's even any AEW haters and trolls out there, but there are, just because they resent Meltzer and other people putting them over like this. But we love the way that watching it makes us feel. The enjoyment that we feel in watching the matches, the settings of it. Daly's Place, I said to you during the pandemic, it's become one of my favorite places ever to watch wrestling, because I'm one of these people. It's why I'm looking forward to the Arthur Ashe show. I love seeing stuff that's different. And, you know, they give you the different, you know, because most arenas look the same. Let's be perfectly honest. Most arenas, there's no distinguishing in the features of it. And so love that where it's different there. And the fact that we get to see the legends that we love bathed in nostalgia and treated with respect. And that's an underrated thing, Jake, but I feel it every bit as much as you do. That's the way I want to see those guys promoted, and that's the way most wrestling fans want to see them promoted, is with respect and something that gives you that warm bath of nostalgia when you see them.
Absolutely. I mean, that is, there's only one legend that I want to see as good as comeuppance, and he never has. That's the only reason why I want to see it. But other than that, it's like every other legend has been, if WWE is booking them, that they have been as like treated as afterthoughts.
Right.
And now all of a sudden AEW promotes them as like, hey, this is a big deal. Like guys are like Sting, for example. Dude, that's a 60-year-old man with face paint on.
Right.
You can kick his butt. But no, that's the legend Sting, and the legend, by the way, that I don't think he ever puts anybody over when he comes back is Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I think it would be the absolute most epic, like, every time I see him on TV, I just want him to put somebody over, and he never does.
Right.
And I get why he doesn't, because he's like, he's like on the same level as the Hulk Hogan.
Right.
But there's so many times where it's like, oh my God, anybody, just beat him down. And I hate to use this term, but he's an old man, and he's just the one guy that I feel could give the rub. And I did hear him on one of his podcasts. He was talking, and he's like, they asked him like why he never did. He goes, "Oh damn, never asked me."
Right. Yeah.
Just like, I guess that makes sense. If they never ask you, why would you do it? But it is. The way that the AEW uses legends, the way they use up and coming talent. Like I know who Red Velvet was a year ago.
Right.
I know Darby Allin was. I didn't know who Orange Cassidy was. I mean, unless you're following some hardcore indie stuff. And granted, they have guys on there that I have no interest in seeing, and I'm not going to name names, but those people, I think they're doing a very good job of not featuring them on television. And as their roster continues to grow, and as they're bringing in more and more outstanding talent, a lot of it from the Forbidden Door being open from around the world, and the other side of it, guys that are just frustrated in the WWE, guys like a Moxley, guys like a Miro, that are coming, like a Christian. Let's be real, Christian Cage never got a fair break there.
Right.
That are coming up. Matt Hardy, that's another one. Guys that are coming down there that are looking for an opportunity and looking to basically not be under the vision of one person.
Right.
And there's no shame in Vince. You had a good run. You had a good run. It's like
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's exposed Vince's entire way of doing things, because the promos are in many cases come up with, by the wrestlers. Obviously, they got to run them by the EVPs / Tony Khan, but it's a thing where the creativity of everybody involved in this, it just helps make it what it is. It's so much more spontaneous. It's more like wrestling the way that it used to be, in the sense of WWE.
And the way you like it?
Well, yeah, I mean, but here's the thing though, of less artificial, like WWE. Remember, especially in the mid 2000s, when it would just be, they would just come up with a gimmick. They'd call a guy up from OVW and tell him this is what your gimmick is now, and try and force feed somebody into something. Versus wrestlers used to talk about back in the day that your persona was basically, that's just you with your personality turned up to 10. It comes from within, and then you find ways to amplify it to make yourself more marketable and entertaining. And we've come back to that now, of where the wrestlers are, as much as humanly possible, being themselves as far as how they emote, how they express things, their style of doing promos. I mean, look at a guy like Eddie Kingston doing a promo, and I defy anybody to tell me that that's, fake wrestling promo style when that guy's out there. So, just,
my dude.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the most natural guy on the mic, probably of the last couple of decades. I'm not saying the best. I mean, he's probably top 5%. I'm not saying the best one necessarily, but the most natural, as far as the gift of speaking from the heart, unself-consciously, and the way that he carries it out. And it's a thing where they've done a great job to this point of, again, with a deep roster, cycling guys on and off of TV, week to week here, and that's going to be more of a challenge as you're filling 3 hours of airtime, and that's where I think again adding at least one more title would be helpful in that way as far as giving a focus to what the TV events are going to be and how things are being presented. But it's a thing where somebody we didn't even talk about, Malachi Black coming in and being used right off the bat so much better than he was in WWE. A guy that I thought could have been set up potentially long term. There's only ever going to be one Undertaker. But as far as a guy to carry that torch in the WWE, doing a very, very marketable, darker character, that guy was a natural for it. He's showing right now in AEW exactly what I always saw in him, and to be fair, what so many other people saw in him. So it's going to be a balancing act, keeping all these guys in there and whoever else they're going to sign. And there's always talk about, Buddy Murphy or this guy or anybody else potentially as well. And there's only so many spots to go around, which, again, that's all the more reason I think they need a trios title to help out here, as well as, maybe, pairing up a couple of these guys and moving them into the tag division. It's not immediately apparent who's going to be left to take the title from the Bucks. I mean, when they're going on being the elite and they're saying there's nobody left, unfortunately, that's a lot more of a shoot the way that they've been booked than anything else here. But maybe the Forbidden Door is the answer to that. If somebody comes in, if they bring in Finn Juice, full-time to the roster or something else. I will say, you mentioned Tanahashi before. Supposedly Moxley was lobbying for this. Moxley is apparently going to get him at All Out, which should be just incredible. So they appear to be building to that. And again, all of the possibilities that are there. I mean, it's one of these things, you and I we're going on and on and on here, but it's a thing where you and I are guys who love pro wrestling. And if you could have sat either one of us down to design a promotion and what would emphasize all of the things that guys like us like, it would turn out exactly like what we're seeing, which is not a surprise because Tony Khan is a lifelong smark. He's apparently a guy who posted many years on Death Valley Driver under a name I think people are still trying to figure out. He apparently might have even been the originator of the sleaze thread back in the day. Tony Khan.
I was about to ask, did he create the sleaze thread?
Yes, I've heard that. And he's never, I think he's hinted at it, which, I mean, right now, today, he would be better off not giving any confirmation to that because it could help him make some enemies immediately that he doesn't need to have. But it's a thing where, again, he gets it. He gets the biz. It's in his blood. He has the people around him who have the creativity to be able to add to it. And again, it's for wrestling fans by wrestling fans. And the people that hate AEW are going to say that that's cheesy as hell and whatever. But that's how I feel, and clearly that's how you feel. That's why we love it.
Absolutely. And to circle back to something you just brought up, can we tell the story of, you brought up Malachi Black, and I completely forgot about this. Can we tell the story of how at the NXT house show that we went to in Warren, and he made his debut, and he wasn't even on TV yet, he came out, and I'm like, who's that guy? And you're like, that's Tommy End. And I'm like, who's that guy? and then the match happened, and I was just like, oh, he's pretty impressive. And then I saw him on TV a couple of times after that. But, like, I'll never forget the look on your face. I look at you and I go, who's that guy? You're like, that's Tommy End. And you were all excited. And I'm like,
yes.
Great. Who's that guy?
Well, I saw him on the NXT.
Now it's like, he's one of those things. I was explaining to Keita, my girlfriend, earlier. We were talking about, she watches AEW with me,
mm-hmm.
and I've kind of brought her in to be a wrestling fan,
mm-hmm.
for somewhat. And so she was watching, and I'm like, yeah, that's Malachi Black. He used to be Aleister Black. And she's like, Aleister Black cat. We went to this little shop in Cleveland called New Moon. She's very much into like her witchy spiritual stuff,
mm-hmm.
and they have a cat there that's their mascot. He's a black cat. His name's Aleister. So we started calling him Aleister Black Cat. so when Malachi Black showed up at AEW, just like, Aleister Black Cat's on this show now. So those are those like little fun tidbit things, but it's he comes in and all of a sudden, he just beats Cody Rhodes and calls it a day. And I'm like, she's like, whatever happened to him? I go, he just left.
Well, yeah. And it's...
He had one match with Buddy Murphy. There were a couple matches with Buddy Murphy that I remembered.
Yeah.
But other than that, I can't tell you a thing that Aleister Black did on the main roster of the WWE.
Well,
I know he did a couple tag shots. Again, it goes back to my thing before. He became just another guy on the show because we'll get into this on our WWE discussion, but I'm very glad that AEW, and I listened to him on Chris Jericho's podcast, and Tommy Yen, Malachi Black, he put over, how much of a breath of fresh air it was. And he's like, hey, I've got this idea, and I have somehow got a 30-day release as opposed to a 90-day release. And he's like, yeah, they called the office, the WWE's office was like, yeah, it's only 30 days. Okay, let's do something cool. And this is the pitch, and the fact that, they went with it, and God bless Cody Rhodes, the son of a plumber. He, out of all of the guys down there, has no problem in creating a new star. And I don't think the elite and the EVPs have any problem creating a new star either, but no one has created more new stars while there than Cody, almost to the point where he's getting dangerously close to being a high-profile job guy.
Well, he did fatten himself up on QT Marshall and the Factory over several months, so there is that. And a Go-Go, he was putting himself over those guys, but so I think he'll survive. But Aleister Black, that character, I was hyped for him. He was still being promoted as Tommy N because they didn't have his name yet, but he was on the first NXT UK special in 2017, and I was really hyped to see him there. It was a showcase match, although I don't think they put him over in that match, oddly enough. But it was one of those things with him. I felt like, and this might be nitpicking, but when he got called up to the main roster with Ricochet, who I also really, really love, I felt like it was a disservice putting them together as, these are these two indie superstars who are together living the dream, as opposed to they should have been promoted as distinct entities. And I felt like being paired up with each other watered down the essence that each one had, if that makes any sense. Because Aleister Black, he should be a dark type character, right? And he does the thing, and he does that spot where he sits in the ring, and Ricochet, he'll springboard in there to sit next to him, and Aleister Black is struggling to hold back a smile. I'm like, this shouldn't be. There shouldn't be a spot where Ricochet pops Aleister Black, and I'm not criticizing either one of them for the spot. But it's Aleister Black should be a stern type character, not somebody who can be popped by his babyface tag team partner. They didn't have any idea what they were doing with those guys all along. And again, in AEW, you're seeing them used to their best, to best possible, potential. And again, all we can do is hope going forward that'll continue to be the case. I think having the quarterly specials, I think moving into this new era, I think that's going to help things out because it's more natural pacing. I think when you have 8 shows, 12 is obviously too many. One big show per month, that's the model WWE is stuck on, but it's too rushed, it's too forced, it's too everything. 8 is perfect. 8 is the perfect balance, I think. You build to those shows, and I think it'll really help with, spotlighting a bigger part of the roster. And again, hopefully just keeping the magic that's brought them here to this point, because they're a very, very, very special promotion as we are closing in on their first 2 years in business.
I absolutely agree with you. Sorry, I just got distracted. I guess we'll segue into our next show. I just walked into the room and Falter was walking out, which, might I add, is the one guy that's not in AEW that I would love to see there.
Well, yeah.
But, they have done something absolutely incredibly special that is, they've gotten wrestling fans to be like, okay, I'm excited to see this again. Something unexpected could happen from, Kenny Omega winning the Impact Championship, which, is just an absurd thought.
Right.
And also the AAA title. It's just like, okay. And then, the idea of, anybody who works for anywhere can show up there. And let us not forget also the Forbidden Door went the other way when Chris Jericho showed up on the WWE Network for Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast.
Right.
Which you can't blame Tony Khan because that just benefits him, but I mean, it has extended we mentioned all the other companies, and it has extended to the WWE to the point where AEW got publicity on the Peacock.
Yeah, well, that's the last time that's going to happen. Well, I think they learned their lesson from giving AEW any publicity, but I will say this, that it is a thing here where it does kind of make me snicker a little bit. You know that the deal behind the Forbidden Door probably is Kenny Omega loses the AEW championship first. So you've got, what's the biggest Impact show of the year? Victory Road, that's in the fall. They were probably planning on transition.
Bound for Glory.
Or Bound for Glory, okay. So they were probably going to transition the Impact title back to one of their own guys at that show. Not so fast. He can't lose the belt yet. Probably can't lose the belt at Triple Mania to Andrade, who is now also an AEW guy, which is kind of funny. So,
but it's kind of weird that they didn't bring that feud up at all.
Well,
it hasn't even been mentioned. And you think if they're in the same place at the same time, it'd be like, I was like, if you got, the way I look at it is you're writing television, you also write that into your television. I just think it's kind of easy television, personally.
Yeah, but
that's just me.
They don't want to do a heel versus heel thing. They want to have both of them feuding with baby faces. So part of me gets it, but it is kind of an odd kind of aspect to this thing here. But yeah, with what you said about WWE and Walter here, that's probably our cue to wind this one down and pick up the next conversation. So, Jake Digman, thank you very much for being here for the AEW conversation today. Really enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1362.